for it. All right. Welcome to the One Life, One Chance podcast. I'm your host, Toby Morse. Today I have a very, very special guest. My friend Richie Birkenhead, which I like to call Richie Underdog. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I think you gave me one too many verys in the very, very, very special.
So for those people who don't know about you and your band, basically my podcast is I'm talking to people who have inspired me and been part of my life, especially when I first moved to New York. Were you born in New York?
I was born in New York. I grew up mostly in New York City, had short stints in England as a little kid.
Oh, nice.
We lived in the south part of England on the sort of Sussex-Kent border in East Sussex in a little town called Ticehurst. That was just for a brief period when I was 6 and 7 years old. Spent my junior high school years in Long Island and from high school onward in Manhattan.
Wow, I didn't even know you were in England. That's
And actually, in my adulthood, I spent about 6.5 years living in Los Angeles. But that was
so that's before I moved here for sure. That's probably 90s, right?
Yeah. I moved back. I was there from 96 to 2002.
Oh, wow. And so how were you in school? Like, did you get good grades? Did you graduate? Did you play sports?
I got very high test scores, and I did play sports. My grades were mostly high. There were some the classes I didn't like. I kind of just said fuck it too. But yeah, I graduated from a prep school in Manhattan called the McBurney School, which ceased to exist shortly thereafter. It was there for about 100 years. It's
wow.
Actually, J.D. Salinger went there, and he mentions it in Catcher in the Rye. And,
wow. That's pretty amazing.
And the Fonz went there. Ted Koppel went there. Adam Horowitz went there. It was, all that's left of that school is a wiki page.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it stopped. It was a private school. Once they ran out of funding, somebody managed it into the ground, and sadly, it's no longer there. There's still a little inscription in the concrete on West 63rd Street that says the McBurney School, but it's gone.
That's great.
So yeah, I mean, I was decent in school. I actually left college. I was taking classes at both NYU and the New School, and just basically English lit and philosophy and stuff. Nothing that would ever lead to a lucrative career in anything. But then I started playing so many shows that I just took an indefinite leave of absence that's still going. So, I probably got like 66 credits as a college kid, and then I started playing shows and driving around the country in a van. And, you know
yeah, man. So how old were you when you got like exposed to music and stuff?
Well, I was exposed to music at a very, very young age. My mother's actually a lyricist in musical theater, but she's also a great pianist and just a very musical person. And my earliest music memories are both sitting under her piano while she played and like listening to Beatles records and Stones records and Pink Floyd records and headphones. And from like my brother, I had two older brothers, so I'd listen to their music like crazy. And so I got interested in music very early, and even when I was at like sleepaway camp as a kid, we would go to Tanglewood and I'd see like Joan Baez and James Taylor play and things like that. And I started getting into punk in the late 70s, actually when punk started to exist. A friend of my older brother's, a guy named Eddie, he started playing me like the first Clash record and the first Ramones record. And immediately, I was just sucked in. I was drawn to just how different and how raw and how genuine it all sounded. And it was also, and even within that little new genre, there was such a range of like kind of comic book silliness / nihilism like the Ramones, and then there was the Clash, who was like very political. And even as a young kid, I kind of got that and got the difference between kind of American and English punk, and I love them both.
Sex Pistols.
Yeah, all of it. And my older brother, who was going to NYU at the time, he started taking me to shows. I saw the Ramones at CB's, when I was way too young to do that, but I did it anyway.
Nice.
And hardcore kind of followed suit. I was always into a very broad range of music. I never just decided I'd be into one genre and
Me too.
the exception of all others, because I just love music, and I never I never diverted from that, even when I was playing in hardcore bands. And I was still listening to everything. But the first time I went to a proper hardcore show, I guess, would be in 1981. Two friends from high school and I went to Max's, Kansas City to see the Bad Brains.
Damn.
And I think the Beastie Boys were on that bill. It was the winter of '81, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
And that was the first time I saw like real slam dancing that wasn't pogoing.
It
was like people really colliding with each other, and I thought that was really cool too. Because to get back to your question about did I play sports, I did. I played football, and I actually really dug the contact that was happening at these shows. So, although I hated jocks, I played football.
That's crazy. So how old were you then? You like going to shows? That's young, right?
So I guess now I'm gonna date myself and let everyone know how ancient I am. It's still good to know that there are a few people in hardcore who are older than I am. Very few, but very few. So I was born in August of 1965. So
okay.
So I guess if we're talking, if it was winter of '81, I think it was early '81. So there you go. You can do the math. I was like a 16-year-old. I was 16, I guess, 15 or 16. Were you
into skateboarding too back then? Was it? Because for me, punk rock and the skateboarding was so connected back then.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny though. Like when I first started going to hardcore shows, I was like a mishmash. I was in a band that was playing kind of psychobilly / rockabilly. So we were like somewhere between Eddie Cochran and the Cramps. I was in a band called the Bel Airs, and we got to play with a lot of really cool people. We opened for the Cramps. We opened for the Gun Club. We played a show with Carl Perkins at the Mud Club, which was amazing. And so I was always I was very precocious as a kid. So even like before I even went through puberty, I was going to like the Mud Club and hanging around just underground New York culture. So
awesome.
I was always really, really drawn to it, and it was very different from where I lived. I lived on the Upper West Side. It sounds really silly. It's all on the same island, but you know how different the Lower East Side was from the Upper West Side. And then it was night and day, right? And so it was so attractive to me as a kid, and I had kind of a fucked up, home situation. So it was also an amazing escape, to just get to it felt really special, and hardcore felt that way. It felt
totally
like this very close family, back then.
Yeah, totally. I was talking to just Jimmy Gestapo the other day too, just like a kind of a dysfunctional family too at times, but regardless of that, I mean, it was just that community of going to these places and escaping your home life, whether you're single parents or had somebody pass away in your family or something. I'm the younger one too. I have two older brothers like you also, and they're the ones that exposed me to skateboarding and punk rock. But for me, when I went there, it was definitely like, I don't know, I saw kind of like father figures in some of the bands I was seeing and looking up to these people and just being somewhere I felt safe, even though it didn't look safe from the outside perspective. Looking in, it looked crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely.
So when did you realize that you wanted to start a band, like do a hardcore band like Underdog? Like when did you?
I guess I kind of realized that, the music I was playing while I was having a great time playing this kind of rockabilly music and in that underground scene, I had a lot of rage and a lot of anger and a lot of things I needed to get out. And I didn't think about it in such a methodical way back then, but something was burning inside me. I needed this catharsis of loud, music, and loud, angry music, and physical, like, closeness with an audience, and I just needed to do what the bands who I was seeing at A7 and at Ukrainian Hall and at CBGB's, what they were doing, and I just remember feeling like it felt disingenuous to keep playing music in a genre that was like old and had already happened, even though I loved it. And I still do. I still love that stuff. I still listen to Gene Vincent, Eddie Cochran, and early Elvis. I still love all that stuff. But it felt like I needed to get the music that was inside me out. So, and I just, it just kind of happened organically. If one friend from high school and I, he was the only other guy on my football team who also just hated jocks and loved punk rock. He actually got me into Stiff Little Fingers when we were in high school. Cool. Guy named Scott. He and I started a band called the Numbskulls, and we started playing together and playing that music in '83. And then I think that same year we made a cassette, or '84, I think we put out this cassette that was a demo. Yeah. And by put out, I mean we made like a dozen copies and put stickers on them and passed them out. Yeah, it was nothing that was ever released. And we started playing shows. We had some really fun shows opening for bands, and we would go anywhere and play any show for any. So we got to open for GI, and we played with for some reason, we always ended up on these weird bills. We'd play in like Syracuse with these like Oxnard hardcore bands and stuff. I remember, I'm trying to even remember who we played with.
Ill Repute or like Starlight 13 or
maybe Ill Repute. And who was the band? Fuck, I'm getting old. Who was the band that had that song, I Hate You? Fuck.
I think a lot of bands had that. Let me think.
Yeah, I think everyone did. Nick was in, oh man. No, anyway. But we played a really fun show in '85 before Numbskulls morphed into True Blue. We played a great CB show with the Faction. And,
nice.
And I was, Steve Caballero was like one of my idols from the time he was like 12 and he beat, I think, Dwayne Peters in a skate contest or something. He was like this child prodigy and Thrasher magazine was put it on newsprint. You couldn't get it in New York except sometimes at Rat Cage. So it was like amazing to go play that show and see Steve Caballero and see the Faction and just I was like starstruck and
that's awesome.
But so then the Numbskulls morphed into True Blue when Russ was playing in Murphy's Law.
Okay.
This is now fast forward to '85, and Russ and I would always see each other at shows. We were the only two people with skateboards, believe it or not.
Wow.
Like occasionally somebody else would have a skateboard, but really rarely. So we always saw each other and we'd always be skating. We'd be like skating the same curbs or the same little
That's awesome.
wooden quarter pipe that somebody had somewhere. And we became fast friends, and one day he said, "Hey man, I don't think I'm going to be playing with Murphy's Law anymore. We should start a band." And that band became True Blue, and it was like half Numbskulls still, and and then it kind of like members dropped out and different members came in, and it became Underdog. And,
wow.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Because really back then, like you said, there wasn't many skaters. It seemed like skating was just a California thing. So,
much more so a California thing. I mean, there were skaters, but in New York, it was super rare. I mean, I didn't start seeing like a lot of people skating the Brooklyn Bridge banks and that until like '85, until around then. That's when it really started. But in those early days of skating becoming really popular all over the country and even in the suburbs of New York, like 81, 82, 83, 84.
Yeah.
It was still kind of on the fringes in New York City proper.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there were a lot of skaters. Like Russ lived on the Jersey Shore, so he had friends that skated, and they skated half pipes. And I remember in like '84, I think it was Suicidal's first show in New York. I think it was at the Ritz or somewhere, and there were a ton of skaters all of a sudden, and they all came in from Jersey and Long Island and stuff. So they were there. But the city kids didn't skate that much. They really didn't.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Yeah, Suicidal, man, just like growing up in like obviously Thrasher and the Bones Brigade videos and those skate rock cassettes. It was such a good soundtrack, man. It was such a good combo, like to have that. I remember like just watching those videos and watching like the Youth Brigade song come in on.
Did You Want to Die? Or aggression songs. Yeah, I love that shit.
So yeah, so for Underdog, when you guys came out, obviously later on with Vanishing Point and stuff like that, like there was more like reggae stuff, and then the imagery of like of the famous one, the guy carving in the bowl with the drain, pulling the plug out the drain. That was so cool to me too, because I grew up not in New York, and I was skating before I moved to New York, and then seeing like you guys like promoting that stuff, it was awesome. Was Token Entry did it? That was later, or was that before? I'm not even sure. Because it was skaters too, Timmy Jones.
I'm not sure either, but yeah, they I know they use like skate imagery and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's skating started to really take off, I think, in New York around '86. Probably, like whenever that like second Bones Brigade video came out.
Yeah.
That was when I started seeing like it, because that's the one right where they're skating the Brooklyn Bridge banks. I actually saw them. I saw them filming that by accident.
No way.
I did. I happened upon them. I was in Times Square skating. I was just like skating from like uptown to downtown, which I used to do sometimes. I would skate all the way from the upper side to Washington Square Park or whatever.
That's awesome.
And I saw like Scott Olson drop off the top of a van or something. And then I saw a bunch of Pal Peralta guys. And I was like, holy shit. And I saw like Lance Mountain skating. And I just like kind of followed them. And, and then they ended up at the Brooklyn Bridge banks and stuff. I saw them filming here. It was just so surreal because you never saw pro skaters in New York City then.
Yeah.
It was absolutely surreal.
It's crazy. Like now, like I'm lucky. I'm friends with some skaters I grew up loving, and like when you look at them in magazines or in the videos, you think that they're like these older dudes, but they're really like close to our age. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So much older.
Yeah, Steve Caballero is like my age.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's bananas.
What was did you have a favorite trick back then? That was way before the Ollie, I think, was it?
Well, no. People were Ollieing for sure, but I was always partial to Frontside Grinds, which was actually an Underdog song.
Yeah, man.
I don't think we ever recorded, but I always thought that even though it's a simple trick, it's just the gnarliest trick. It's like you go up and you're basically, you've got your back to the ground or the bottom of the pool or the bottom of the ramp, and you just basically putting your trucks on either some concrete or some metal or some PVC. And it's just, I don't know, it just feels, maybe because it feels,
I agree,
the most like you're kind of, without doing an air, the most like you're kind of flying. You're just kind of looking up and you're, it's hands free. I don't know. I always love the frontside grind. I love the frontside laybacks.
I love those too, man.
Layback grinds. Yeah, it's just.
And it's a little scary doing frontside shit. Backside shits. I like backside.
Yeah, backside shit always felt safe. I think that's why. I think frontside shit felt more rewarding because it was just a little gnarlier. Backside is a little safer. You like see where you're headed. Yeah.
It's crazy how far like skateboarding's come too since then. It's insane. Like the Olympics coming up and.
I look at it now and I'm just like, this is just bananas. But back then, I always liked people who either had really quirky personalities or who just were really stylish. Like nothing against Tony Hawk. I was never a fan of his.
Yeah.
And he came out kind of later. But I love weirdos like Neil Blender and Lance Mountain.
Yes.
I don't know. And the people who weren't. Like some skaters were kind of just like jock-like, and they always had like the hell, and I just wasn't into those guys as much, who were like athletes.
Yeah, I
always liked the weirdo skate guys.
Yeah, and Lance Mountain, Neil Blender, they're like incredible artists too, man. They design a bunch of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how? I know you did. I know you're in Youth of Today too. So how did that happen? So you're an Underdog first. So that stuff comes out. Your 7-inch comes out, right? Is the first thing's Underdog 7-inch, or you made a demo first?
The first thing that properly was released was the 7-inch in '85 on New Beginning.
Yeah.
And, but there were tapes floating around before that, cassette, like live cassettes and all kinds of things. There was a few full-length sets from CB's Madness and things. But, so the 7-inch came out, and at the same time that I was in Underdog, I remember getting invited to see the first Youth of Today show, which was they were opening for AF at some place outside of the city. But they were opening for AF, and AF was kind of in that, I think it was in like the Cause for Alarm era, where they were kind of metalish. And so I remember seeing Youth of Today, and immediately I recognized Ray from Violent Children. I had seen
Okay.
Purcell at a bunch of shows. I'm not sure if I ever saw Young Republicans, but I had seen those guys. So I just started talking to them. I'm like, hey, man. And we hit it off. And I remember, it sounds so funny to be like, it was 1985, but I remember saying to myself, like, wow, this sounds like hardcore sounded back in 82, which was only 3 years before, but it seemed like a lifetime before that.
Yeah.
And especially because a lot of hardcore bands were starting to sound kind of heavy metal.
Yeah, they were.
So it was so refreshing to me. And I was like, it was like seeing, SSD and DYS and those bands.
Yeah.
So I was immediately drawn to the man. And from that day forward, Ray and Purcell and I kind of became inseparable friends anyway. And
Awesome.
Purcell ended up becoming my roommate when he moved to New York. And so one day it just kind of made sense. I was always hanging out with those guys.
Yeah.
And Purcell's like, you should play in YOT. I was like, I would love to. Are you kidding me? And I'd love, So I recorded the first album with them, Break Down the Walls. I wrote a couple of parts of a couple of songs, and Drew played on that album. And it was all it was just a bunch of, close friends. And that was really awesome. I guess it created some tension with Underdog. And it got to the point where, I remember sitting down with Russ. I was like, dude, I'm going to probably go on the road with these guys sometimes. And I love to go on the road with Underdog sometimes.
Yeah.
And I guess, at some point Russ was like, we want to tour at the same time. So, I'm going to ask Carl to sing. And that was a little weird. I wasn't angry, but it was weird too.
Mm-hmm.
Underdog was like, my baby. I wrote all those songs, so it was like to see another guy singing words that I wrote felt really strange.
Yeah, that would be.
And I love Carl. Rest in peace.
Carl Eisman did it. Oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was for a good portion, and this. Yeah, for a good portion of, I guess, 86 going into 87, or maybe it was all within 87. Carl was the singer of Underdog for, the live singer of Underdog. He never recorded with them or anything. But while I did the Break Down the Walls tour, Carl toured with Underdog.
That's crazy. I didn't even know. That's wild, man.
Yeah.
Were you a straight edge kid before you met those guys, or did you get into that later?
No. I was actually into it earlier. I came from a family with an alcoholic father. I was always kind of I actually, when I was very young, I'm not one of those guys who never did it. I actually did it really early. I drank when I was 11 years old.
Wow.
I was going down a bad path, and actually punk rock and even just starting to become aware.
Mm-hmm.
Even before hardcore, really, starting to become just sort of politically aware and sociologically aware. I realized I don't want to be like the kids in my school who like get drunk and like date rape girls and stuff. I just didn't want to be like that. And I guess I just developed over time. I just developed a kind of disdain for drinking and being around drunk people, and drugs didn't appeal to me. So. And that kind of happened naturally after I absolutely did do that stuff, and I did abuse it, and I realized it was just the wrong path to go down. So I guess the first time I started kind of identifying with it would be, inspired more by, I think, Minor Threat.
I was going to say that, yeah.
SSD Control, and DYS and stuff like that. I love those guys, and I loved, went to see all those shows, and it was always, I always felt weird with the labels, and, even though I definitely X'd up and did the whole thing with you today, I've always had this, there's a weird paradox with subcultures that always kind of bothers me, and that is that people get more into the superficial style of it and the labels, to the point where then the actual message, right? So they get so a lot of people in that scene started to become very kind of exclusionary and very judgmental, and they look down their noses at people who weren't like them. And that always bothered me. It still does. About so it's a weird thing about nonconformist movements. They develop a lot of like conformity within them. And, it's okay to conform to good principles, but I think, just when it becomes more about, who dances the coolest and who's the hardest, and who goes off the best on stage, and I start to get like a little, and I did get a little turned on. I have to say the guys in youth of today were never, ever like that. And, touring with them, they were, I still, to this day, I love those guys so much. And they were truly, and still are, really good and decent people. And they never got like that. But I saw a lot of people in that scene start to become very exclusionary and very judgmental. And that did bother me a lot.
And that's like the opposite of what punk rock's about. You know what I mean? And
Of course. It was the ultimate, it was punk rock, should be the ultimate haven for individualists, people who want to be themselves and not conform to a bunch of superficial bullshit rules.
Yeah, you can see back then, even looking at pictures. I didn't move there to '88, but like the different sectors, like there's the straight edge kids, there's the punk rock kids, there's the skinheads, and like I had never tried anything either. My brothers were always getting fucked up around me too in the house, so I was kind of scared straight. And I listened to like Sex Pistols, but couldn't relate to those lyrics. I like the Clash, I loved all that Ramones, but then obviously when I heard Minor Threat 2, I'm like, oh shit, there's a name of something I already am. I'm 13 and never tried anything, and I can still be cool and skate to this aggressive music. And I was like, fuck it, sign me up. That was it for me too. Like I didn't really know there was a name for it, but for me it was never, and has been still to this day, not preachy whatsoever. I hated that. I hated when people started beating people up who weren't. It was just such a bum out. It got violent and too,
Absolutely.
It was crazy times back then. So then, okay, so Youth of Today. Oh yeah, Craig was in there too with you, wasn't he?
Yeah, so he was part of the road show. Like, so we recorded Break Down the Walls. Drew was the drummer, and Craig played bass, and in the touring band kind of switched between Mike Ferraro drum. Mike Judge was the drummer.
That's right.
Craig played bass for a while, and then for part of that tour, I remember Walter actually played bass a few shows. And then I played guitar for almost all the Youth of Today shows, but there were one or two where I played bass.
Wow. That's crazy. You guys are all the switching off. It's crazy.
Yeah, we were kind of switching off. So, it was fun. I had so much fun.
You were so jacked back then too. Like were you like working out a lot?
Yeah, well, I got like pretty lean and mean in high school. I mean, I played football. Again. I wasn't
football,
a jock, but I played football. I wrestled. I was into, back in those days, I could just. I felt like I was immortal. I would
you looked immortal and shit.
You like break a bone, it would heal in like 3. These days, not so much. But yeah. So I was definitely into. Purcell and I used to work out together every single day when it was in Youth of Today. I was definitely into physical fitness. It was all part of just being as alert and as healthy as
straight and alert.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you guys is this a true story then? Since you brought that up, you guys would, when you're doing weights, you guys spell out straight edge or something?
No, that's not true. Okay. That's not true. But one thing that was
I thought that was so hard that was awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah, that I like that. That's a good anecdote. I never heard that. That never happened. But I remember once before a show in somewhere like Lawrence, Kansas or somewhere, Purcell and I, we couldn't find a gym that day, so we were doing dips, like bar dips, but like on like 2 tables that we pushed together. Sick. Or something. And some kids walk over and they go, "Are you guys wrestlers?" and I just remember, without missing a beat, Purcell goes, "No, we're Youth of Today."
That was like, sick.
It reminded me of in rock and roll high school when they go, "We're not students, we're the Ramones."
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's like that kind of a moment.
So at that time of touring with Youth of Today, what did you start feeling like there was? Did you, like just seeing that connection with people, like because for what they were singing about, what that message was, it was such. Nobody was talking about shit like that, especially in that type of music. You know what I mean? Talking about making a change and positive and being drug free and being conscious.
You're exactly right. Nobody was talking about that. Like everyone kind of takes that for granted now, and it even became like a parody of itself. But back then, you're absolutely right. Nobody was talking about that shit. I remember like the difference was so stark. I remember a show we played in Detroit where actually my Les Paul got stolen and a bunch of other stuff.
Damn.
But I remember we played with this band Boom and the Legion of Doom, and they were like kicking around a severed deer head on stage. And,
Holy shit.
And it was like, everyone was just into this nihilistic, like, it was a bunch of people who I guess had missed actual punk, but they wanted something that was just as nihilistic
and shocking and shit. Yeah.
And shocking. Yeah, it's like kids who like cutters and shit,
Yeah.
It was kind of like I kind of felt like we were trying to lure people from the dark side,
Totally.
Lure them from the empire to join the rebels.
Yeah.
But yes, it was definitely like that back then.
Because Minor Threat had the one song, but it was just Ian who was straight. It's not the whole band. So then Youth Today gets inspired, and it's the whole band, and everybody's X'd up, and it's just like everybody looks young and they're like in shape, and it's just so much energy. It was just, I don't know, man. I thought it was just.
But also, Minor Threat had ceased to exist at that point.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So there was nothing else around like that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess at the beginning of Youth of Today, it was still like the end of like SSD, but their last album was How We Rock or whatever. And so
that's right.
It had all gone away.
Yeah.
But as we toured Break Down the Walls, there were these little groups, these little factions of straight edge kids everywhere we went. And
it's awesome.
And it was actually cool that the crowds that would see us were a total melting pot. There would be kids with mohawks and safety pins through their noses and shit, and going off to Youth of Today. So it was amazing. We weren't just like preaching to the converted the way it became a little later on.
What's amazing about that was like pre-internet, pre-phones, and like it was just the word was spreading across the country, whether it was through, who knows, fanzines or reviews or whatever. Just how that word spread is incredible to think about now, because it's almost impossible to think about it with phones now, but it's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, the world is just a global village now. So that's why there's no regional, anything, I mean, the great, and I'm not trying to say, there's a lot of amazing things about the internet and the fact that we can all like reach each other from anywhere.
Blessing and a curse.
But it was a cool thing about how things were so regional. So like West Coast hardcore sounded so different from Boston hardcore or New York hardcore, DC hardcore, but in a very natural, organic way. These were insulated regional scenes that developed their own styles. So like you could listen to Kids of the Black Hole, and then you could, or then you could listen to Sit Home and Rot, or listen to, Straight Edge or Seeing Red. And they were all so distinct from each other. And what you have post-internet is just basically bands picking which sound they want to emulate. Like,
100%.
Do we want to sound like a Victory band, or do we want to sound like a Revelation band?
It's true.
Do we want to sound like, and that's fine. And everybody has influences, and everyone emulates things that came before them to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But it was just great. It was great when you had these different regions in the country that developed their own unique styles of hardcore.
Yeah, for sure. So the Break Down the Walls record, I'm sure you didn't realize when you were recording how much of an impact it was going to have on the world. I mean, that record everything about that record is a pure classic, and the lyrics is everything about the message, the packaging, the lyrics, just everything is just, when you live in it and doing it, it's like, oh, I'm just making a record with my friends, it's like.
Oh yeah. We had no idea that. Yeah, it was literally just making a record with my friends. I remember we had so much fun making that record. I remember like Ray and Drew going back, because Ray is also a drummer, and he would sit down with, he'd sit at the kit and be like, Drew, what if you did this? And Drew'd be like, no, I'm going to do this. And they'd have nicknames for like different drum riffs like that Drew came up with. Like one was called like the Chicken Wing, and one was, it was just like,
that's amazing.
It was just so much fun. And we were always joking. I mean, that was such a good time making that record. It would literally, it's so infused with positive energy because it was created in such a positive atmosphere.
Yeah.
And even to the point where like, how Ray turned We Just Might into Time to Forgive, right? It was like it was like peak positivity when that record was recorded, and it's all real. It's all that emotion is pure and real. There's nothing contrived about it. Some people might consider it corny, but that it was all like really genuine. Like every word of that, every riff.
That's awesome. And in the New York scene, there wasn't nothing like that. So did you guys get, not backlash, but was there a weird thing like everybody was kind of versus straight edge kids? Everybody was cool about?
No, I think everyone kind of respected each other. I mean, I'm sure that people poked fun at Youth of Today, but when it came right down to it, I think people respected that Youth of Today just kind of had the courage to just be this unabashedly positive, anti-nihilism kind of band. But Youth of Today, we as the members of Youth of Today, and I can tell you, Ray and Purcell still absolutely loved Murphy's Law and the Cro-Mags and Agnostic Front and the Nihilistics and Major Conflict and the Mob and on and on and on and on. We loved New York hardcore so much, so much, and we and as a band, you could say, even when Ray and Purcell started the band in '85, they knew they were standing on the shoulders of people who came before them. So they never had anything but the highest reverence and appreciation and respect for the so-called godfathers of New York hardcore, and still do.
Did you see that documentary?
I did.
So good, man.
Yeah, it was great. I liked very much that it focused on the band as opposed to having a million people from a million different places talk about their idea of the band and their impression. That's how I thought it really distinguished itself from a lot of those. Yeah,
it was just a great story and filmed really well too, and everything. Just the relationship, Roger, and it's awesome, man. I was going to tell you. So one thing on a fashion tip that I got from Youth of Today too is when everybody started rocking like the Jordans and shit, because I only seen people wear Jordans was Michael Jordan, and then in the Bones Brigade videos when those dudes started rocking Jordans to skate. But I think Youth of Today was the first band to start rocking like the high Nikes and shit.
Yeah, because definitely they definitely were. It's funny because the one thing I'll credit myself with before Youth of Today, and there's two things that I'm going to give myself credit for, and no one will ever convince me otherwise, because I know for a fact till the day I die, I'll swear on the fucking lives of anyone I hold near and dear. I had I was the first person in the scene, in the New York hardcore scene, to wear Vans off the walls when you could like order them from the West Coast only, or order them directly. And I am definitely, absolutely, 100% the first person who had an X Swatch. Absolutely, because I was living on Thompson Street at the time, and a Swatch shop was opening or had opened in Soho. It's still there, and I remember I was in there, and they had a picture of it, and it wasn't out yet. I remember telling the person at the store, I was like, the second these come in, even if you just get like samples for yourselves, I need this fucking watch. And the woman from the store called me, and I got it, the fucking first one that arrived in New York City at the only
Holy shit, this is big facts right here being said. Holy shit.
And I always just wore it, and I never said anything about it. And I went on tour with it, and then slowly but surely it like
that thing
crept
grew up
into the consciousness of the hardcore scene. But it wasn't until much later that I started seeing other hardcore kids rocking.
Wow. So we're going to go on record saying the first X-Watch and then the first pair of Vans.
Off the wall.
Off the wall.
High top, off the wall.
Yeah. Wow.
100%. Going on the record. I'll go to fucking. I'll go under oath and say. But yes, Youth of Today absolutely was the first band that I saw wearing like Jordans, etc.
It was so crazy. Yeah, because it was always like skins wearing boots, but then it was like I call them like sneaker skins, like. That was man. Just like all the imagery from that and the fucking
hooded Champion sweatshirts.
Dude, it's so crazy how big Champion is now. It's like it's insane. My son's like, I'm gonna get some Champion. I'm like, really? Like it came back. It's crazy, man.
I always tried to be like a little, like try to do something a little different, probably to my detriment. It's like the same way that like, Underdog wanted to be on like some weird label instead of Rev back then. Like, so like when I was on tour with Youth of Today and they were rocking Jordans, I had my Ewing Adidas, things like that. Like I always had to do something a little different. But then I rock some Jordans too. I think with Underdog, I was captured on film rocking it.
Were you into hip hop back then too as a kid, or just?
Yeah, I was very, very much into it. I used to, in fact, Yeah, in like I was going to shows at the Roxy in like '82, and
Wow,
like the Treacherous Three and the Fearless
that's
Four
awesome.
and all that stuff. And I used to listen to Mr. Magic, Rap Attack, and Marley Marl and all that stuff on KTU and BLS.
Yeah,
Going back to from like '79, '80 until those shows stopped playing. Um, I I guess I didn't remain as into hip hop later when it just kind of became less raw and
mm-hmm.
less kind of when it started getting, I don't know, maybe around like from Yo MTV Raps on.
Yeah,
I didn't start disliking it in any way, and in fact there was a lot of stuff I loved, all I would say all the way through like the early '90s.
Public
I
Enemy, all
was
that shit,
like,
Wu-Tang. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So like the first Wu-Tang record's incredible, right?
incredible.
And I loved all the Tribe records and things like that. But
Yes.
then it started, for me, that's like the last, like I would say Wu-Tang is like the end of it all. Like '93, '94 is kind of the last great, to me, like the last great hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of became less interested in it. When it
Yeah.
went from like gold rope chains to like helicopters and Bentleys and shit, then I was off
Yeah.
it. I was like, all right, this is a little fucking too much.
Shiny suits and shit. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But, yeah, I was very into hip hop, and there were like people I admired lyrically, like being a lyricist. So there were
yeah.
people like Rakim and like,
Best.
believe it or not, Kool Moe Dee, who never had good music
Mm.
behind him, but he was actually as good a lyricist as any of them. Or like, you know, I remember listen like to this day I'll listen to like the Symphony, Marley Marl, like the
Yeah.
first one, and some of those guys, what they were doing then, like whether it was Kane or or what's his name, Polo,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like all those guys. Like
Coogee Rap and Polo, yeah.
some of them lyrically were just absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but
When did you start like realizing you were a writer, like writing lyrics and stuff?
well, I did that from a very early age. I mean, even before I was in bands, I was writing poetry and writing short stories
Nice.
and writing. So even when I was in like this rockabilly band that I was in that band when I was 15 years old. I was writing the lyrics for
Awesome.
like our original songs, and they were like kind of like Cramps, like like I
Yeah.
remember I had songs like Teenage Bloodbath and like Vampira before I heard the Misfits song. And,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, oh no, I'm sorry, mine was called Vampirella. I got it.
Vampirella.
Shit. Yeah, that's right. Mine was called Vampirella. Yeah, so I was writing this like horror themed like psychobilly songs and stuff. And then, but I was always into writing lyrics
Yeah.
from a very very early age, and lyrics were always really important to me with music. So
Mm-hmm.
it's why as a kid, I before there was punk, before I was exposed to punk, before it came into existence, literally, I worshiped David Bowie mostly because of his lyrics.
Yeah.
And, and there were just certain people. I was always drawn to lyrics. It was always a really important aspect of the music for me.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Vanishing Point's a perfect record, lyrically, everything musically. I love that record so much, and I feel like
Thank you.
So after that Youth of Today tour, you came back. So obviously you went back to Underdog. So what was the time frame in between that and then doing Vanishing Point?
I remember. I think there was just a show we were playing at the end of the Break Down the Walls tour.
Yeah.
I remember feeling inside that I love these guys and I love this music, but I really miss like expressing myself with a microphone and
Yep.
and a pad and a pen and like writing words. And I just I remember saying to Ray on stage, I think before the set started, I said, "Ray, I love you. I think this is my last show." And he like gave me a big hug. And during the set, he said, "Hey everyone, it's Richie's last show." And I think like that night, I had the pad and pen out, and I was just like writing words and just,
Wow.
and there were other things going on in my life that I just needed to like get out musically.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, so there was really it was a smooth transition. It was like, I was playing in both bands. I went on tour with Youth of Today and kind of temporarily got replaced in Underdog.
Yeah.
I played my last show with Youth of Today after, we made an album, we toured the album. I played my last show, and I think I was on the phone with Russ the next day. Like, hey man, I miss Underdog, and that was that.
What year was that? You remember?
That was '87.
Okay. You know what's amazing about what you just said? You were like, I told him on stage this is my last show, and then he just gave you a shout out about it. And it was just, that was it, because you were friends. You can't do that now with bands. You have to talk to my manager. I'm lawyers. Like it's like, just think about how bands are now. It's like businesses. It's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right.
It's wild. He's like, okay, cool. We're friends. I get it. You're gonna do something else. That's awesome.
Yep.
So then you came back and started writing that record, I guess, right?
Yeah. It was. I had some of it. I had already kind of written, just like sitting around with my guitar.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, like the song "The Vanishing Point" was just like a chunky thing that I would just play on my guitar all the time. It was just in my head, and I was like, one day I'm going to turn that into a song. I'm going to write some words for it, and certain things, or like the reggae riff that became with the song "Without Fear."
Yeah, great song, man.
I was playing that even while I was in Youth of Today. Whenever I had downtime, I'd just be sitting around my guitar. I'd be playing those little upstrokes and those little minor and major chords, like the little triads that became Without Fear. So there's always like things like that in my head. There's always chord progressions and melodies in my head, and then like I'll want to say something, and I'll either like adapt like a poem that I wrote in my notebook, or I'll just be like, what is this chord progression that's in my head all the time? What is it saying to me? Is it sad? Is it
Mm-hmm.
filled with angst? Is it angry? Is it this? Is it that? And what am I wanting to say right now? And the songs would just kind of form that way in my head. It would start usually with me just sitting around my guitar, just on downtime, and these things would just, I felt like I pulled these things out of the ether, but they'd be just on repeat in my head. I had this little playlist in my head of chord progressions and things. So,
awesome.
So The Vanishing Point was probably mostly written musically in my head while I was in Youth of Today.
Damn.
And then it just turned into sort of like demos, and then turned into an album, just over time.
Yeah, man. I remember Back to Back's one of my favorite songs. It's crazy. I'm in my office right now. I'm gonna send you a picture after. I have this collages I made, like 4 different frames. It's all my favorite album covers, and I'm looking at Vanishing Point right now on my wall in my office. It was so cool to be there too. I got to be at that release party where you guys played with Swizz at the Pyramid. I remember there was a picture in Thrash. I was like, oh my God, I'm in Thrash. I'm standing in the background and shit. You remember I used to make those beaded necklaces? I gave you one. I used to rock my necklace. And shit.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, awesome. I remember very well. Yeah, the red, green, and gold and black.
Yeah, but that record was so amazing. So what was the reaction to that record when it came out? Because it did have some reggae on there, some more singy stuff. It wasn't just like straight up like, it was different.
It's weird. I think I remember with Underdog, and I think I've always done this with every band. I've always found myself in bands that were kind of on the fringes as far as style and music and everything else, because I always had an aversion to like writing songs to like a template, or to try to like fit into a scene, even though I love the scene. So I actually never concerned myself that much with anyone who had a negative reaction, because it was,
I love that.
me, it was like, life is short. Like I'm not, I'm sorry that I'm not doing this, like not working toward like a brief that you gave me on how like this should be. So I can tell you that when we played those songs that were inspired by or had parts that were full on reggae, the live reaction was always great. I think people, you could feel it in the room. People loved it. I think they welcomed this like different, obviously we were inspired very much by the Bad Brains. And we also all loved reggae, but I think the way our take on it was very different from the Bad Brains.
Yeah, totally.
aside from like obvious reasons, and they were definitely had much more, kind of roots in hardcore. I remember even when I saw the Bad Brains in '81, when I think there was only the Pay to Come 7-inch, and it didn't even have like the printed sleeve yet. It was like the first iteration of it.
Damn.
But I remember they were dressed kind of like rude boys. They didn't have dreads at that point, but they were playing dub, like these long like dub kind of improvised things
dub jams.
during the live
Yeah.
set. And they would break into like reggae jams, and I think that stuck with me. I think that maybe because that's the first hardcore I ever saw, it always resonated with me, because I always loved. Even back then, as I said, I always loved a lot of music, and I was really into the Studio One label, and I had a lot of the 7-inches and things, so like all this dub music on Studio One.
Yeah.
For some reason, more so than Trojan. I got into the Trojan stuff later, but I was really into Studio One, and I saw like parts of the songs the Bad Brains were playing really sounded like Studio One dub to me, and I guess I just always loved it. And with Underdog, it just kind of happened organically. I would be writing songs, and then parts of those songs would just turn into little reggae riffs on the guitar.
I love that, man.
Yeah, it just developed. But yeah, the reaction was good, at least live.
Yeah.
That
was great live.
Sure.
Did you ever feel like you wanted to? Was there a point in Underdog where like I want to do this as a career, or did you always have like not just a plan B, but were you working jobs in between tours and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I was always doing other things. A lot of times it would have to do with visual stuff, like either like art directing things, or and I was always into all things visual. I was always into art and photography, and so I would have these little things. I did kind of odd things. I remember I worked for a company that produced theater for a while. I did all manner of things, and then I guess it just music became like a full-time thing after a while. It was just, I was always either recording or touring. At some point, I found myself just always either recording or touring. And even then, I planned to like someday I'll go back to college, or someday I'll do this, someday that. But then, sort of during the time I was into another, fast forwarding many years, I was really into. I just kept finding myself doing like creative direction and art direction and like visual things for other people's projects and things. Like I remember, for a while driving down when I was living in LA, I would drive down to Revelation 5 days a week and be like an art director there.
Oh, wow.
I was like in the art department, or like I remember before I moved out to LA in the sort of early mid 90s, I remember Adam Horowitz was doing this. He and I were friends. We knew each other in high school, and he was doing this thing called Die Rollerblader. So this like side project, and I just like boshed together some graphics for that, or like
cool.
I was always wanting to do things visually. So outside of music, it was really visual art that always appealed to me. So any way I could do that as sort of gainful employment or whatever.
Yeah.
Not that the thing with Ad Rock was pro bono, that was free, but like Revelation stuff, or just art directing people's records. So, and actually what I do for a living now which is creative direction with like a big creative agency.
Oh, nice.
That has offices around the world, is very, very visual. And I actually find myself, doing things that are still artistically rewarding, and working music into it as much as I can,
Yeah.
And I still like to make music. I still, whenever, obviously I've got 2 kids and a mortgage and mouths to feed. So, and I don't want to be away from them, so I can't get in a band for 10 out of 12 months.
Yeah.
And, I mean, yeah, it must be. I mean, you still tour. It's got to be rough, but I'll still do the occasional 4-day tour.
Yeah.
And I never, when I'm home, I never put I never stop making music.
Yeah.
I play my guitar every day. I sing to my kids. I write songs with my kids.
It's amazing.
They're taking piano lessons, and they love music. And music is still very much part of my life every single day.
Yeah, I remember when you worked at the Pyramid Club too. That was like late '80s, early '90s. Some crazy shows there too, man.
Yeah, I worked at the Pyramid Club from like '88 to don't know, to maybe into the early
Yeah,
90s.
man, that was a crazy spot, man, especially back then for sure.
Yeah, I did everything there. I did the door. I DJ'd. I booked shows. I actually booked shows there for a while. We did like hardcore matinees.
Yeah, that's crazy shit
And,
there.
yeah.
Into Another, man, your vocals on Into Another totally like to another level. It was incredible to hear, like, I don't know, just you singing like that, because nobody really heard that. I heard some of it in Underdog stuff, but you really pushed yourself and like,
Yeah, it was very, very
awesome,
different.
man.
And that was very deliberately different. A lot of that was Drew and I were like, how can we make a band that's completely like shock people and probably alienate a million people? We used to laugh about it, and I was like, and I always loved guys like Freddie Mercury and Rob Halford and people who could like sing 3 octaves and Drew and I, when Drew and I, even when we were in Music Today together, we would listen to Queen, Pink Floyd, and T-Rex and
awesome.
and Judas Priest, and like so much stuff that wasn't hardcore.
Yeah.
We just he's like me. We just love music. I mean, like, to this day, I listen to all of that.
Did you take vocal lessons for that or anything?
No. I was always able to sing, and I always had range. But
yeah, it's crazy you held that back in Underdog, and she could never know a little bit on the Vanishing Point, but
yeah, a little bit. But I would always kind of whatever felt appropriate to a song. You know? Like it was never like a conscious thing. Like it felt appropriate to that piece of music. It was just the way I wrote the song. So maybe I was just going to scream and yell this whole song, or maybe But
when that record came out, like I think was it the 7-inch the first thing you put out? Wait, was the
no, with Into Another it was a 12-inch. It was Revelation. Yeah, I remember, and it was all at first. It was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing, and then we just started having so much fun with it that it ended up lasting from 90 to 97. So,
damn, really? I didn't know that was 90. That's crazy. I thought it was later.
No, the first show was the first show I ever played. I think it was Into Another and White Zombie at the Pyramid.
Wow,
at the Pyramid in 1990.
Holy shit, White Zombie at the Pyramid too. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Then you guys got some great tours. I think you guys were touring a lot, man. You were grinding for Into Another.
Yeah, we did. We toured a lot. There was one year I remember where we toured for 10 out of the 12 months of that year. Just back and forth Europe and the States, and it was just but we loved playing live. We never captured on record what we did live or how we sound live. We were always a better live.
Yeah, I agree.
Band. And, and
I would say same with Underdog too. Same with Underdog. Same with Vanishing Point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, for sure.
So, damn, man. So Into Another lasted that long. You guys, I think you guys had video. I think you had a video on MTV or a video somewhere. I remember maybe.
We did.
Yeah.
We had a nightmare with our label and everything. We recorded this album. We went on a tour with the Ramones and White Zombie, and the record wasn't in the CD wasn't in any stores yet. Like they dropped the ball with distribution. They were like, we were on Hollywood Records. They stopped being distributed by Red, like Sony or no, they stopped being distributed by Polygram, and they were making a new deal. And so not only was our record not in the stores, we went on this tour, we made this video. The label fucked up the audio on the video when they gave it to MTV, so it had this like really low level. The CD, when it was finally in stores, first we were touring in Europe, and it had the right jewel case and artwork, but it had the wrong music on the disc.
Oh,
like
my
shit
God,
like that.
dude.
So the reason one of the main reasons the band broke up is we sued our record label, and we were in litigation for a while, and then it just killed the band.
That
killed
sucks,
the band. We were in litigation. Yeah. And then I was like depressed for a while. And then like the band formally disbanded. Like we just stopped playing altogether. In 97, we were in London. I was living in London for most of 97. We were recording. We sued our label in that time because we just became so frustrated with them. And then that record never came out. We all just kind of had to go our separate ways and just like do something else to survive. The only thing I did musically between then and 15 years later, making an EP with Into Another called Omens, which we did.
I remember that.
2016 or something. The only thing I did was my friend was in a band called Deadsy, so I sang a song with him on an album. Like literally, that's the
What's it
only
called,
thing
Deadsy?
Yeah, the band was
I remember
Deadsy.
that name.
I
Yeah.
sang they did a Sebadoh cover, brand New Love, and so I sang with my friend Elijah, and that was the only thing. That was literally the only recording I did in those years.
We super bummed on music and everything industry. We just like,
yeah, it was
a rough time.
It was a rough time because not only did we sue our label, but until we finally got like a settlement for that lawsuit, I actually wasn't allowed to do anything musically because of the fucking contract. And
Damn.
it was a nightmare.
It's like just like locked in there. Yeah, that's crazy, man.
Yep.
So when did you become a dad?
Well, I became a dad in 2008. My daughter, Charlotte, was born in December of 2008. My wife, Jamie, and I have been together for 18 years, married for
that's awesome.
12 and a half years.
Amazing.
And I have a 10-year-old daughter named Charlotte and a 6-year-old son named Clive. And
awesome.
Bought a place in Manhattan in 2012, and we've been on the Upper West Side and just doing the dad thing. Yeah,
man, it's so crazy, like becoming parents and trying to balance. I mean, I definitely tour less, and I definitely take my son with me when I can, and it's hard, man, especially doing music and having a family, trying to keep that balance and leaving and coming home and missing them. It's a blessing and a curse for sure. I'm lucky I can still play music, but I like being home too, though. It's like, I don't know.
And it's great to have your kids be part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And then Underdog still plays shows, which is awesome. You guys are playing shows.
I actually do shows with both Underdog and Into Another, so it's great. In fact, we have shows coming up.
Oh, you do any shows in Cali or anything, or no?
No, nothing booked yet. I mean, we probably should. The last time I played in California was the Rev.
Yeah, that was Rev show.
That was it.
That's awesome. And then one more thing too about the obviously the vegetarianism stuff. Do you get into that through Youth of Today? Obviously back then, even before We're Not in This Alone, I think they were on that vegetarian tip early, right?
Yeah. I was in the band before We're Not in This Alone, but we Ray and Purcell and I all became vegetarians around the same time. I guess around like 85ish.
Was that through like the PETA videos and stuff like that, or just because before they got Krishna conscious?
For me, actually, it's funny you say that. For me, actually, a PETA video was really got me thinking about it, and that's going back to like 83 or 84. I remember I was on the Upper East Side, and I think there were some people outside of like Hunter or somewhere, and they actually had a TV and a VCR, and like,
damn,
we're playing videos, and there was a video of lambs being slaughtered, and you could hear them screaming, and it had such an impact on me. It gave me fucking nightmares, and I remember just thinking like, God, I love animals so much, like why would I eat them, and it just so it actually was it was a PETA video from like some activists that were out on the street that got me really thinking about vegetarianism. And then I'd say throughout 1984, I started to really wean myself off of meat. And then, and then in 85, I was like, fuck it. I'm just done. Like, I don't miss it. Like, I'm not going to go back.
Yeah.
And then I didn't become vegan until 1990. And that was
still, that's way early. People didn't know what that fucking word was back then. You know what I mean? Like,
no, they didn't. It's funny you say that because people don't realize that now. They don't realize like how weird it is to be able to go into a supermarket in the Midwest and find soy milk and fucking oat milk and shit.
It's crazy, dude.
Back then, like in the 80s even in the late 80s and the early 90s, like I could tell you in the early 90s when I was touring with Into Another. We started going on the road in 91. Soy milk was like finding gold. It was like you could find it in New York Los Angeles, San Francisco. Like, if you were in fucking Des Moines, you didn't find any fucking
Hell
soy milk.
no.
You were eating like avocado toast every day. Like,
Yeah,
people don't fucking realize that. Finding
it's true,
tofu or
man.
fucking seitan, like at the, kids have it so fucking easy these
It's
days,
amazing how it's come full circle.
which
And
is
like,
great.
yeah,
I
vegan's like
love
the
it.
biggest trend, but it's like the most important trend because it's saving the fucking planet and animals. It's so amazing to see it come full circle.
Yeah.
And in my
Oh,
heart, besides
yeah.
KRS-One, My Philosophy, and that song Beef, in my heart, I feel like hardcore music was the first and foremost music. Whatever. Okay, the Smiths. Okay, my bad. Meat is Murder. But and that genre, underground, was pushing that shit way before anything, and people thought people were crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really kind of this very outlandish, fringy, like, you know, lunatic fringe idea. And now
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that every single pedestrian outside my office right now knows what plant-based diet
It's
means. And
amazing, dude.
it's absolutely amazing. Well, and I mean, right now it's like we're staring the next mass extinction in the face if we don't fucking, address
Mm-hmm.
global warming. And,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
agree.
one of the biggest contributors is animal agriculture. So
Yep.
it's literally, we're now at the point where we know, the scientific community knows, that animal agriculture is untenable. You can't keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's horrifying, but in a way, it's kind of great that we've reached this tipping point where people know we got to cut this shit out. Like, we can't. Like, our grandchildren aren't going to inherit a planet that's habitable if we don't cut it out.
It's amazing. Like this year, the first time ever was the first plant-based commercial in the Super Bowl for the Beyond Burger with Carl's Jr. They had it for that, and the Grammys, like the first time ever in history. It's just so amazing to see that shit, dude. Like,
yeah, I know. I can't believe like Carl's Jr. has Beyond Burger.
it's crazy.
I mean, it'd be nice if they stopped killing cows too.
Yeah, for sure. But like,
it's a step.
Yeah, but like the Del Taco have it, and like fucking Umami Burgers, #1 burgers, the Impossible Burger. It's just like they have a fat burger out here. It's just crazy to see that, man, and like, and know that the meat industry and the dairy industry are fucking feeling it, man. Like, it's Impossible and Beyond are like the biggest threats ever. It's fucking.
Well, you can see they feel threatened. Like, milk has, the dairy industry has all these milk ads now out that are basically like trying to insult soy milk. They're like,
it's right.
It's brilliant. They're,
milk does the body good. It's so fucked all the shit. You like when you're a kid, you like the 4 food groups, what you're supposed to eat.
Yeah, all that shit was created. It was created by the Beef Board and the Dairy Council.
Dude.
Yeah, it was all money. It was, I mean, it was all, the science was always there. It's not like this is all new. Like, we've always known, zoologically that we're primates, right? And we know what primates eat. Like, we with the exception of some that eat like the occasional termite, like we're not carnivores, we're we have the physiology of herbivores, but I mean, it was always there, but you have big money, like just like how big money keeps us burning fossil fuel. There were people, that were like subscribers to Popular Mechanics were making fucking electric cars in the 50s. They were making cars that could run on hydrogen in the 50s. But you can't, you've got big oil companies bill $50 billion. They net $50 billion every fiscal quarter. They're not giving that shit up anytime soon.
Hell no, man.
Until they're starting, they've invested, thank God, they've invested hundreds of billions of dollars in alternative energy because they know that that's where everything's going. But they didn't start doing that until they saw profit at the end of that process. So
it's crazy, man.
Money drives everything, and
it does.
So that's why I say it's almost a blessing in disguise that animal agriculture is untenable. I mean, they're going to keep doing it, unfortunately, because it's so fucking brutal and horrifying and cruel. But at least they see how profitable plant-based products can be.
Exactly.
And they're more sustainable. You don't have to use 1,500 pounds of grain and thousands of gallons of water to yield a pound of seitan or tofu.
Yeah, it's true, man. Gallons of water make one hamburger. It's fucking insane. My I have a friend who's a vegan. He's a cardiologist at Cedars-Sinai. He's vegan. There's like 6 vegan doctors over there, and they said when they go into the cafeteria for lunch, like all the food they're serving causes all the heart problems, and it's like it's just payoffs. Like whoever's putting that food into they're paying off the hospital. It's just like all like big money, and it's fucking. It's just crazy when people don't put 2 and 2 together. Like what you said, how you saw that video as a kid, and you're like, I love animals. Why am I eating them? I think it's so hard for people to make that connection. Like all these people are dog rescuers and dog lovers, but they eat hamburgers. They don't really get the point yet, you know?
Yeah, I remember at one point I volunteered for Greenpeace for like a minute when I was like a kind of newly minted, very enthusiastic vegetarian. And I remember it was with all these Greenpeace people, and they're like, hey, you want to come to lunch with us? I was like, sure. And went to like some diner somewhere, and they're all ordering hamburgers and like bacon cheeseburgers and shit. And I was like, you guys aren't vegetarians? They're like, no. I was like, why the fuck are you trying to save whales if you're eating fucking cows?
It makes no sense, man.
It makes no fucking sense. So I got so turned off. Like,
wow. Yeah, there's some people saying you can't really truly be a true environmentalist if you eat meat. You can drive around in your
Yeah, and by the way, it's definitely. I don't want to discourage anyone from being an activist.
Not at all. Not at
So
all.
God bless those people for doing what they're doing. But yeah, it would be great to take further steps to It's like none of us can call ourselves a pure anything, right?
No,
like,
it's impossible.
I'm a vegan, but I fly on airplanes that burn, thousands of pounds of fuel, and probably every flight I take kills God knows how many animals. You know what I mean? So it's like we all try. We try and
do our best. We're not perfect.
As we can. And apart from like a few Jains in India who are like, brushing like the gnats out of their way with a banana leaf as they walk, or so. It's like it's very hard to make your way through the world. So. Yeah, I love that statement. You can't be a true environmentalist if you're not, if you eat meat. But I don't want those people that eat meat who are still like working to curb global warming.
No, totally.
Curb global warming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But it's like I go to the dentist and like everything they put in my mouth has been tested on animals, but I'm still going to go to the dentist and get my teeth fixed.
Right.
I'm still going to take an Uber with leather seats or airplane with leather seats. Like I'm always fighting for that online. It's just like you cannot be a perfect vegan. It's impossible. And vegans can be the worst for vegans, and they can scare people away.
I know.
Like
it's so silly.
Like Beyonce and Jay-Z pushing like a vegan catering company. Now they're saying you can win a contest and get free guest lists the rest of their career if you become vegan. And people are like, oh my God, I saw her wearing leather shoes. It's like, yeah, who gives a fuck? At least she's trying. The whole point is that they're trying.
Yeah, I hate that shit.
It's
always
much,
bad
man.
with every movement. It's the extremism in any form. It's like all power to you if you're more vegan than I am. But like we're all, if we've all got our eyes on the same prize and we all want just a cleaner, safer world for our kids and sustainable energy and sustainable food, and we want to end cruelty to animals, like all good. Like I'll tell you where you can buy some non-leather shoes. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I'm not gonna write you off because like anyway.
No, it's totally true. I mean, there's a bunch of people. This guy named Waka Flocka, he's like a huge rapper. And he went vegan. He was so about it. And then somebody saw him eating honey or something, and they flipped on this dude. And he's like, yo, I ain't vegan no more. You guys are worse than the cops. And like he stopped being vegan. So he was so bummed about it. But it's like, it's so true. Like I never liked that preachy shit. I call myself teachy, not preachy. I just try to like educate people and lead by example and not try to like shun anybody for, at least you're trying is my point. But,
exactly.
But so here we are now. You're a dad. You had such good success in music and you inspired so many people, and still doing music. And now so do you feel like a lot of the values that you got from being a hardcore punk rock kid, whether it be straight edge or being vegetarian, just whatever you got, you use that in your everyday life as a parent and a husband, probably?
Absolutely. Yeah. All the time. In fact, I just had a little conversation with my daughter walking her to school, because she colored part of her hair or whatever, and and she was telling me about some other kids at school who had done it, and I said, Charlotte, do you feel the need to do what the other kids are doing when it comes to things like that? She's like, no, Daddy. She's like, I actually was the first one who came up with the idea. I was like, okay, good. And I was like, you never have to feel pressured to do what your friends are doing, even the friends that you think are really, really cool. She's like, I know that, Daddy.
That's amazing.
So yeah, things like individualism, and not bending to peer pressure, and and I always teach my kids, like, always side with the kid getting bullied, never side with the bully. I was like, even if it doesn't feel safe, like, I got you. Like, no matter how unsafe you feel,
it's awesome.
Always take the side of the kid being bullied. So, like, I've told my kids that since they understood words, like, and that's actually stuff I learned, like, really learned it in earnest in the hardcore scene. Like, the kids in my family, like my siblings and I, we kind of raised ourselves. We had kind of absentee parents. We kind of raised ourselves. So, like, those lessons I kind of learned on my own. And I remember even in the hardcore scene, like, I would always, if I saw anyone getting bullied, or if I saw someone in, at a show trying to hurt people who were smaller than they were or whatever, I always jumped in, and I always took the side of the kid getting bullied. So that was like a big deal for me. And look, now we have a fucking bully for a president, so it's still a very valuable lesson to learn for kids. And definitely I would say that when the whole vegetarianism and veganism thing hit the hardcore scene and it caught on like wildfire, that was hugely inspirational to me, to see that I had all, to realize all these people who are into this music that I'm into and the scene I'm into feel as passionate about this as I do. That really was inspiring to me, and it was happening in that scene long before it was really catching on in the mainstream.
100%.
I mean, there were always musicians who were into vegetarianism. And Paul McCartney and George Harrison.
That's right.
Were
Geezer Butler too.
Long before we were. I didn't realize Geezer Butler.
Like 30 years vegan or something. Yeah.
I remember that Tom Scholz from Boston, the guitar player from Boston, he was a vegan when every other musician was like a vegetarianism. He was like using the word vegan. I was like, before anyone.
That's amazing.
Like, anybody. I remember Tom Scholz wouldn't. There was some function or event or something where, like, Boston and Michael Jackson were both supposed to be involved, and he pointed out that Michael Jackson has he had animals in captivity, like tigers and chimpanzees and things, that shouldn't be. And he's like, I won't do it with a person who treats animals that way.
Damn.
And it was like, so he was like an early pioneer, but hardcore, definitely gave me a lot that I take with me to this day, sort of morally and ethically. I mean, you have a full gamut of people in hardcore. The hardcore scene had racists and bullies too. Mm-hmm. It had misogynists and homophobes, and a lot of that. But like my crew and my friends and the people that I associated with, I think we all inspired ourselves to be better people, and we all kind of learned moral and ethical lessons that we took with us into our adulthood, and will keep with us till the rest.
You inspired me. You inspired me to be one too. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And you seem to me like you always like the protector, because you like not the biggest one, but I feel like you were like kind of protector of people.
Well, I was often the guy that would jump in and like fish.
You weren't afraid to throw down and protect something. Yeah, you weren't afraid to do that.
No, I was never afraid to do that. Like, I mean, there were definitely times when, whether it was Russ or Ray or anyone that I was on the road with, there were times when I would definitely step in to protect my friends and put an end to a threat or
Do you consider yourself an optimist or optimistic or pessimistic?
I like to think I strike a nice balance. I'm not a like a cynic who has just like a negative view. There are times when I think I'm a realist. And
it's my wife calls herself.
I can see when there's like a bleak outcome to something, for instance, now, like I'm not afraid to say I am passionately anti-Trump. I probably
Me
feel
too.
more passionate about that than anything I've felt in my
Yeah.
adult life. Because
Yeah.
I think he's an existential threat to everything I hold
So
dear,
scary.
and is destroying this republic and just the philosophies on which it was founded and everything
Hmm.
else. But so like when a lot of my friends who feel the same way I feel politically get their hopes up about certain things, I will, in their mind, maybe be a little pessimistic and say,
Yeah.
well, actually, it's not. This isn't the red line you think it is, and it's not the tipping point you think it is. And unfortunately, 6 months from now, and so far, unfortunately, I've been right about that stuff.
Yeah.
Although I was wrong when I predicted that he would lose the general election, but there were definitely forces outside of, you know.
Oh yeah.
But so I can be sometimes realistic to the point where other people might infer it as pessimism. But
Yeah.
I would say overall, I'm an optimist because I do believe there are far more good and decent people in the world than cruel,
Me too.
bad people in the world. I think there's more empathy and love in the world than hatred and apathy.
Yeah.
So I think overall, in the big picture, I'm an optimist.
Yeah. My wife calls me. Yeah. My wife says she's like a realist too. Like, yeah. Um, what's scary about Trump is that this country elected Bush for the second time. That's what's starting. That's what scares me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, but what always blows me away is that, and it's really so sad that not enough Americans value education, even self-education. I don't care if somebody dropped out of school when they were in 8th grade, but to deny yourself knowledge and
Yeah.
shut yourself down from having a real worldview. You know, to me, Trump is the end result of reality TV and video games
100%.
and social media, like all
Yes.
the things that are just brain-numbing, anti-intellectual bullshit.
Yeah.
And I just, it blows me away that so many people who voted for him voted against their own self-interest. They thought that a guy who grew up with his dad with a $200 million trust fund from his dad, who's not only never worked an honest day in his life, but has cheated every worker that has ever worked for him, every
Mm-hmm.
contractor that's ever worked for him, who started off his career getting sued by the Justice Department for racism, for racial discrimination, and
Mm-hmm.
did it twice, and who just has a long history of being a pathological liar, who, to the point where, only people now are realizing the guy was never even actually a fucking billionaire. He's had a lot of money. He's had hundreds of millions of dollars, mostly from his dad. Every business he ever started went bankrupt. Everything he's done was a sham, like Trump University, or an abject failure, like his casinos. But the guy has refused to pay so many of his debts, and he is so existentially dangerous to this democracy. But the fact that so many working class people voted for him in any other developed country, there's usually something tantamount to like the Labour Party in England or the
Mm-hmm.
Labour Party in Australia. That the reason why people who work in this country have insurance or have paid time off is because of unions, because of labor movements,
Yeah.
because but something happened, after the kind of Cold War and then the McCarthy era of the early 50s, where this something happened where the working class thought it was patriotic to be against anything that helped, that was good for social
Mm-hmm.
institutions, for
Yeah.
Social Security, and for Medicare and Medicaid. The funny thing is that anyone in a union now, they love their union benefits, and they love anything the government can do for them, and they love doing anything they can to get over on the government, get
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more, get a little more overtime, because there's overtime laws because of things like that.
Yeah.
But they'll vote for a guy like Trump, and they're only now realizing that they got less of a refund. That, oh wait, I see what he did here. He gave his buddies all a tax break where guys like Wilbur Ross, who's already a billionaire, he's sticking millions more in his pocket since that tax break for the rich, and just because everyone got like a little bit of a break year one, they think they're all good. They don't realize that by 10 years into this tax break, the only people paying taxes really are going to be the working class and the poor.
It's
You know,
fucked,
it's
man.
like
It's so
we're,
fucked.
we got so hoodwinked by this fucking guy, and unfortunately, in since Ronald Reagan, I mean, really since 1980, between then and now, CEOs of big companies, their income has increased almost 1,000%. It's well over 900% and
Mm-hmm.
almost 1,000%. The average, and that's factoring in inflation, factoring in everything,
Yeah.
and factoring in all of those same things. The average worker's income has gone up 10%. Before Ronald Reagan, you could work a working class, a minimum wage job, and go to any state school in this country and pay your way through that state school. You could go to Michigan State on a minimum, earning minimum wage.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd break your back, but you could pay your way through school. You can't pay your way through any fucking state school on minimum wage now.
No, dude.
So like, and things are only going to get a lot worse under this administration, because he's I hate to break it to all the Trumpers who are working class people out there. This is not your guy. The guy that lives on Fifth Avenue and wouldn't fucking have anything to do with you or anyone that drives a fucking Ford F-150.
Yeah.
He's not your guy. He's not your fucking guy. He's there to make guys like Wilbur Ross rich. He's there to put he put Scott Pruitt in charge of the EPA. Scott Pruitt had sued the EPA 11 times and is as anti-environmentalist and pro-big oil as you can get. And the minute Scott Pruitt let his buddy Wilbur Ross know that he would be stripping away all these regulations, guess what? Wilbur Ross, who has one of the biggest stakes in ethanol of anyone in the world, his net worth basically like doubled overnight because all these regulations went away. I mean, it's all happening right in front of our eyes. It's this giant fucking kleptocracy, and we're all just fucking sitting back and worried about how many people liked our most recent post.
I agree. It's crazy that dude's from New York. The dude lives in Manhattan. That guy's like a New York dude living in a multicultural fucking city. It's just insane. Like, obviously, he's been in a bubble his whole entire life. Doesn't give a fuck about anybody but himself. Probably doesn't really even care about his kids or his wife.
The one thing as a New Yorker that I take solace in is that New York hates him. New York hates Donald Trump, and always has. I mean, you look at poll numbers, but that's the irony, right? This fucking guy that lives on Fifth Avenue in New York is adored by people in Mississippi and
I know, dude.
Rural Pennsylvania. It's just like, you fucking kidding me? Like, how could you think that this is your guy? And they hate people who would look out for their self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
They hate Elizabeth Warren. They hate, I don't want to say they generally, but the majority of people in these red states hate the very people who would help them, who would help their children, who would improve education and healthcare for their kids and their grandkids.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to. I try to watch, like, do some Vice news. I do different places where I get my news, but it's hard to go down that rabbit hole. It gets really dark, and like, I try to obviously live my life the best I can every day, not getting too caught up in all. But I have to keep obviously in touch with reality, what's happening in our fucking country and the world. But do you have like a source of news you go to every day? Do you check?
Exactly.
I mean, it's hard, man. It's especially you live right there too. It's fucking wild, man. What do you think the outcome is going to be? You think we'll get reelected?
Well, being an optimist, well, even if he is, so I don't know what the near future outcome. I still worry. I think it's very likely that he won't be reelected, and that look, 3 million more people voted for Hillary, and 10 million more people voted for Democrats in the midterm elections. So the blue wave is a very real thing. It's really sad that the Electoral College exists, because we wouldn't even be having this conversation about Trump. Because the majority of this, try explaining to anyone else in any other democratic nation that you could lose by millions of votes and still win the presidency, right? So
it's crazy.
So that keeps hope alive for me, but I think, like most very wealthy people, he'll never have to truly answer for his sins. It's like, how many billionaires are in jail? How many even millionaires are in jail? Mm-hmm. Very, 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 very few.
Yeah.
John DeLorean got caught on tape, making a massive drug deal, and he was acquitted. So it's like, if you're rich, all you got to do is bribe one juror out of 12, and you're good. But
I know it's crazy. Shit pops up every day about him. It's crazy.
But I do think that I think enough people in this country are fired up that I feel optimistic about my kids' generation. I think they are going to live in a world that has been forced to deal with the environment and deal with the threat of totalitarianism and kleptocracy. And they can see how. I mean, we now see how you can rig the system here. You can, through gerrymandering and through social media and allowing Russian bots to help you out and a lot of other things. You can literally take control of the wealthiest, most powerful nation on earth. The Republican Party, which is pretty much just a bunch of old white guys like me, through gerrymandering, through disenfranchising people of color and making it almost impossible for them to vote. They've managed. They managed for a time to have all three branches of government, even though the majority of people in this country didn't want that. So think about that. This is supposed to be a democracy. And it's demonstrably true that the vast majority of people did not want Republicans to control the House and the Senate, to control all three branches of government, to control the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of this government. But that's exactly what the Republicans were able to pull off just by redrawing lines on a map and making it really hard for black and brown people to vote. And it's fucking scary, man.
It's really scary, man.
That shouldn't be possible in a democracy. And so, but I think that the fact that all this stuff's been exposed, and the fact that we've got a bunch of young people in the House and the Senate, and more so in the House now, but there will be more in the Senate, and hopefully in 2020 we'll have a president who addresses climate change and everything else. I'm hopeful for the future. I am hopeful for the future because the majority is on our side.
Yeah.
So
100%. And my final question to you is, do you have any daily rituals?
Daily rituals. I mean, they're probably all really boring. I'll give you one just to show you how, when I can't sleep at night, I play chess on my iPad. Okay?
Wow.
That's how.
Okay.
So do I get up and do transcendental meditation and then go for a hike up this hill near my house? I don't know, because I'm still I live in the city and but I of course the first thing I do every morning is I hug my kids and tell them I love them. Amazing. And it's the last thing I do every night.
Awesome.
And I do it as often as I can throughout the day. And I like to sing with my kids and travel with my kids and my wife as much as I can. So I like to do anything that isn't work. And if my kids and my wife are involved, then I'm in heaven. So I just make time with my family, my daily ritual, and trying to impart what little wisdom I have left in my aging old brain.
You're not that old, man. You're not a coffee guy?
I do. So yeah. Okay. So as far as that goes, I drink coffee, but only in the morning. I can only drink. So I do every morning. I start my day usually with some oat milk with 3 or 4 shots of espresso in it.
Nice.
And a little bit of maple syrup. That's my jam right there.
Nice.
That's my morning drink. And then for the rest of the day and into the evening, I drink tea. I'm kind of a Yorkshire Gold guy. That's my tea.
Nice.
And again, a little bit of maple syrup and either oat milk or soy milk in my tea.
Maple syrup's good for you, isn't it? I think it is, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just heard something about that recently, actually.
But and then that's about it. I cook a lot. I've always been big on the cooking.
Oh, awesome! So. Yeah, I suck at that.
So yeah, I do a lot of cooking.
You're cooking every day.
I cook something every day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean we eat at restaurants a lot too.
Yeah, we eat too much.
I cook every day.
You like Candle 79?
What's that?
You like Candle 79?
I do. Candle 79 actually made the wedding cakes 12 years ago.
Oh wow, awesome, man!
Wedding, yeah.
That's awesome. But shout out to Benet. She owns that spot. She's amazing. I love Candle 79.
Yeah, and actually, her parents, I think, are close with my in-laws.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, so
Small world.
we ended up getting two different wedding cakes from them for my wedding. It was I love that place. They actually have a place on my side of town. I live on the
Yeah, they're the cafe.
west
They have like
side.
the west. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they have Candle Cafe West.
Sick. Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everything you brought to my life with your music, and just knowing you when I moved to New York, and you always been cool with me, and great time seeing your band and everything.
Yeah, man, you've always been a good friend, and I appreciate what you're doing for young people, and for,
Thank you.
For all these generations that came after you and me. You're putting a lot of good out into the world.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate your time, and hope to see you soon in real life. Sometime soon. Thank you, Richie, for your time, brother.
Be well, my friend. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, guys. Thanks for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet to this podcast, please do that. And whatever platform you are listening to this on, I'm glad you found me. You can rate me and review me on there also. So thank you guys sincerely for the support. I cannot wait for you guys to do the next one.